afterwards with some resources that we've gathered that might be of value to you. And we want to be respectful of your time. So we're going to start on time and try to end on time. If we don't get through everything, Amy and I will try to be respectful of that. And we're also going to hold each other accountable with time. And feel free to turn off your camera. You don't need to have it on. You know, pour yourself a glass of wine, make yourself tea, whatever you need at this particular time for you. It's not a problem. And, you know, just sit back, relax, and enjoy. So we're going to introduce ourselves. You want to go first, Amy? Because I've already started all the talking.
Sure. So people might be trickling in, but we're going to, you know, start. We had our sort of more official, you know, qualifications or whatever sent out with the seminar. So I'm just going to say, my name's Amy. I'm a social worker by trade, and we'll talk more about the services that we can sort of, you know, where we're coming from. Anne-Marie's going to talk about that. And I'm just really happy and grateful for you guys giving us your time tonight. That's my intro.
So I'm Anne-Marie Luce. Amy and I got together about a year ago, formally starting to do some work together. When I was the principal at the Canadian International School of Beijing, Amy started doing some webinars with staff there, and we've started continuing to work together. And we were chatting not long ago and just talking about our colleagues and our friends and the challenges that people are facing. And in full transparency, I'm not working in a school at this particular point. I am working on my educational doctorate, but I'm still really connected with a lot of leaders, a lot of educators currently working, and people are struggling, and we see people struggling. Amy sees people in her practice struggling. I see colleagues and friends struggling, and we just wanted to do something that we thought might be of assistance for you, but also something that you could take back and maybe use with your staff. So we also wanted to be really clear about, for us, a leader is not a position, it's not a title. A leader is a role, an identity. All of you are here because you are some sort of a leader. It could be in your home, it could be in your workplace, it could be in your community. And we just thank you for being here. So, sorry, I'm trying to do 3 things at the same time. And I'm, like I said, I'm rusty, I'm out of practice here. So we'd like you to just sort of bring yourself into the moment and just step back in space and time and just take a balcony view. I want you to think in your mind about some of the common issues you're currently facing as a leader. Thinking about that in your home, thinking about that in your community, thinking about that personally in your work. What challenges are your staff facing? Those may be some of the same challenges that you're facing, but they also may be different challenges. And how have these challenges how are these challenges different from the normal? And what impact has that had for you in your role? So we're just going to ask you to think about that as we go through this process together. Amy?
So I'm going to talk a little bit about stress and how it works in our brains. This is not my acronym. I cannot take credit for this. I probably would not choose the acronym NUTS, but it does sort of sum up a little bit around what can trigger a stress reaction. So if you think about, like, novelty is something new, unpredictability, a threat to ego, a lot of us are feeling like, are we doing enough? Are we competent? And a sense of control, which right now is very hard to sort of grasp. It feels like the ground is always shifting between us or under us. So any of these 4 things can make us trigger a stress response. And basically what that does in your brain is it goes back to flight, what we might know as fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, which is a new addition. And basically what's happening with your brain is it's telling you there's a threat, and it's hijacking your amygdala. And that sort of takes out the rationality of your frontal cortex, which then all of a sudden we're in this stress state where we're just trying to survive. So every time your amygdala gets hijacked and it responds, it thinks that it did a good job if you survive. So it keeps going. And right now, we're kind of in this auto stress. Research is starting to show that people have this heightened anxiety that's going on for months and months and months. So a lot of this is having an impact on both our physical health and our mental health, our emotional health. And sort of, I want you guys to think, when we're in the hypoarousal, which, is happening a lot, is it controlling you or are you controlling it? And that's kind of going to tie into, being overwhelmed or compassion fatigue.
So we thought it was really important to name some of the common challenges that people are facing. There's a lack of predictability. It doesn't seem like sometimes we know what's coming next. A lack of control. I know we talk a lot about what's in our circle of control and what's outside of our circle of control. And at this particular time, there are a lot of things outside our circle of control, which then leads to the next piece where we're being forced to respond at a very rapid pace to change. And then a loss of time and sequence. I was thinking today about colleagues who usually have the summertime to sort of catch their breath and reset and restart in September. People didn't have that time over the summer. They just have kept going for the last year. A sense of being over or underwhelmed, a heightening of systemic barriers. And I think underserved and marginalized communities, we're struggling to serve those communities because we can't break down some of those barriers in the traditional ways that we normally would. Feelings of overwork and never getting a break. Did you want to add anything to that, Amy?
No, I think that, also loss of time and sequence. Before we'd have this, like a lot of us are working from home, we'd have these routines of going to work or, and all of a sudden, the other day we were talking about making plans and my mom was like, does it matter if it's a Wednesday or a Thursday? Everything is sort of all jumbled. And so there's that loss of structure. And what we're also seeing in the next slide here is sort of this, like I said, around the auto stress, this hyper or hypoarousal, a lot of irritability and frustration. And this is all going to come back to, what compassion fatigue and overwhelm looks like. We're also seeing an increase in depression and anxiety. One of the things I do is I volunteer for the distress line, and we are up, a huge amount of calls around this isolation and loneliness. And people who already had mental health issues or trauma are being, this is really triggering a trauma response. And so we're seeing a lot more need to access services, but not necessarily an increase in services. So a lot of, people who work in the helping profession are really feeling burnt out. And also we want to look at this from a lens of grief, right? No matter what, we've all lost something. And whether that's what we thought our holidays would look like. For some people, it's more tangible. It might be somebody that they lost to COVID or a job, but there is this grief. And we need to be able to go through that grief of what we thought our lives would look like.
Thanks. So just close your eyes for a minute. We want you to take a little bit of an inventory of your day. So what did you do for others today? What did you do as a function of your job? And what did you do for yourself? And just sort of try to put those into a bit of a percentage. So I'm going to speak a little bit from my perspective as a leader in my previous context in Thames Valley. I know that at 6 a.m. when my alarm went off, sometimes before that, I would start my day immediately trying to decide who was going to be at school that day, what jobs I had to fill in Tavares. I would be at my sink in the morning trying to answer Tavares. I had a little computer set up right beside, like a little desk beside my sink. I'd be blow drying my hair, eating my breakfast, drinking my coffee, checking Tavares. As I got ready to go out the door, I'd get in the car. Sometimes I called my husband who was on the road just to check in to make sure, everyone was taken care of, everything was looked after. I'd get to work. I wouldn't even be out of the parking lot and someone would say, do you have a second? Or there's a problem with this. And then that was my day all day. You start your coffee at 8 o'clock. You maybe drink a quarter of it, 3 o'clock, that same coffee is sitting there, you haven't had lunch, and you've played whack-a-mole all day. You get back in your car, you drive back home, you get dinner on the table, you put a load of laundry in, you take your son or daughter to hockey practice. You help somebody with their homework, you call your parents to check in on them. It's 9 o'clock and you're exhausted and you don't know why, but you still have an hour of work to do because you didn't get to all the emails for the day. You spent 99.9% of your time doing for others or something as a function of your job and nothing for yourself. So we're going to just do a little poll to see how you're feeling. Just take a minute and look at what's the overwhelming emotion that you've felt over the last week, say. So tech support there, Dave, is going to run our poll for us. And we're just going to check in with each other and see how we're doing. So you can just vote on the screen there. Okay, so you can see this is great. Many of you are feeling very calm, very hopeful, supported and connected. That's great. But then there's others that are feeling exhausted and overwhelmed. And I'm guessing that, these emotions change minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day, crisis to crisis, situation to situation. It isn't abnormal to go through those sort of emotions on a regular basis. So many of you sound like you're actually swimming at the moment. I've got this, I'm going to finish strong. We talk a lot about making it to the next holiday or to the next break. For some people that might be 2 weeks. The holiday break is coming up in 2 weeks. For others, some of our colleagues in China or Asia, it might be 6 weeks to Chinese New Year, and they're holding their breath thinking, how am I going to make it 6 more weeks? Some people are sinking. They're not going to make it to the holiday. They don't think they can get through the next 2 weeks. The Christmas concert's coming up. They've got reports to write, all of that. And then there's those that are just treading water. As long as nothing comes at them, they're going to be fine. They're going to just tread water and work to the holiday, hoping that they get through unscathed.
So that brings us to sort of what is a state of overwhelm or compassion fatigue? These are sort of more official definitions, but I think one of the things to remember is that, compassion fatigue used to often be called burnout, right? And it can be on a continuum. So we might feel, calm right now or calm in the morning, and then something might trigger us to have a natural response, stress response, and then we have a flood of emotion. And then it can also go to the fact where we're not even functioning, right? So one of the things that we're going to sort of get you to think about in the next half an hour or so is this idea of how it shows up for you. So we'll show you the common, common symptoms, but it's also really important to figure out how it shows up for you as an individual because it's all personal. So if you're not sure, which, I wasn't when I first started asking myself this question, ask someone you live with. or ask someone you work with every day, and they'll be able to tell you, how do they know that you're getting too overwhelmed or going into compassion fatigue or burnout? So for me, you can go to the next slide. For me, that can look like a lot of irritability, lack of compassion and empathy for sort of mundane issues, especially when I have, I do private practice, and also I manage some mental health centers where we might have crises, and then, to be able to shift back to sort of domestic issues or, what's for dinner, that kind of things, those are hard. So the trajectory of compassion fatigues tends to follow sort of, one path. What we need to remember when we're looking at this is that there's always ramps to get off of this path until we get to the final burnout phase. So the first one, usually we can see this, at the beginning of the year, we're signing up for things. If most of us are leaders or helpers, we might be enthusiastic. And then we get into more of an irritability phase. This is like, why am I the only one doing this? Why is this, we're beginning to take shortcuts, avoiding certain people, but not everyone, but just certain people that get on our nerves a little bit more. And we might start making small mistakes, or, what I might call not being the best version of ourselves. And then there's some withdrawal. And this looks like some, our enthusiasm disappears. We start to become rather irritable. And then there's an increased resentment towards sort of mostly mundane tasks or the repetitiveness or people's requests of us. And then we're going into the zombie phase. And this is where we're just going through the motions. And there's a loss of compassion, a loss of hope. And we start to maybe disconnect from our emotions and use a lot of negative coping mechanisms. Now, one of the things is that this, in a perfect world, kind of like grief, this would follow, the trajectory would be a line. But some people might feel like on Monday, they're in the zealot phase, and then by Thursday, they're in the zombie phase, or Friday, right? So this isn't necessarily, we go, and then maybe people really do get rested on the weekend, and then they go on Monday, and this can build throughout the week. So what we're going to talk about is sort of building those skills so that we don't get to this point, hopefully by Thursday or Friday or by December. So some of the common signs, and we're going to send you this PowerPoint, so I don't really want to focus too much on like listing them. But one of the things I wanted to sort of highlight was the increased use of distractions. And we're going to talk about what the difference between sort of a positive reward or self-care and a distraction or numbing is. We also get sort of a question of, are we doing anything well? And a lot of us, who are balancing many different roles and many different hats, which most leaders are, we start to get this sort of overwhelming feeling that we have so much to do and we're not doing anything particularly well. So nothing I do will make a difference. And it starts to feel a little bit like, I like this metaphor of shoveling smoke, so it's kind of like, or we're spooning out a lake, so it just feels like we're not going to be able to move forward. And I also think starting to question our values. Why are we doing this? What are we accomplishing? My primary value is kindness. Am I working from a place of kindness, or am I not? Right? So this is where we get into some of the common signs and some of where we're getting into, overwhelm or burnout. So in our, self-awareness is probably the hardest thing, because as leaders, we, oftentimes, like Jenny was, or Anne-Marie was saying, we're putting other people ahead of ourselves, right? So we can see everyone else's needs, we're putting out fires, and we stop thinking about our own needs, and we're less aware. Most educators or people who, work in sort of this September to December kind of thing before the holidays will also say, my cousin who's a teacher messaged me today saying, I'm so burnt out. You start to hear this rhetoric, I just got to make it 2 weeks. But really knowing that this is a problem and that it's affecting your functionality is harder. So we want to start thinking, how does this show up for us, right? For me, it's a lot of decision fatigue. So when my husband starts asking me, what do you want for dinner? And I blow up at him and start thinking like, it's an irrational response because I can't make one more decision, right? So this is when I know, okay, things are not going well. So we want to look at our current coping mechanisms. And, I really like this, this cartoon, because a lot of times when you tell people you're, going through a rough time or you're burnt out, they'll say, oh, did you try yoga? Did you try self-care? And self-care has become this buzzword, buzz phrase, I guess, and people sort of throw it around and use it. But we really want to know is it self-care? Are you replenishing yourself, or are you numbing or self-preservation? So, this is beyond the bubble bath. We want to know. So for example, if I go on Instagram and I'm just scrolling and then I look at my watch and it's half an hour, that's numbing. That's not, you know, time to connect with other people. On the other hand, if I set an intention and I go on Instagram and I'm going to look at Chrissy's page to see what her son is doing, because I want to keep up with that. There's an intention, I'm doing it, it fills a need. Oftentimes, especially when we're doing work in the helping profession, we can justify our negative behavior. It's called a self-entitlement, right? So we feel like because of the positive work we do, we deserve this glass of wine, or we deserve to watch 5 hours of Netflix or whatnot. So we want to ask ourselves, is this helpful or is this harmful? Am I eroding or edifying my life, or am I adding to it? Am I really replenishing myself? And remembering that what we do, we become good at. So going into sort of our strategies, I want you guys to think about that, please.
So we're going to talk a little bit about when you have some time to stop and actually sit with your feelings for a little bit and really examine those challenges and how you might move forward.
So coming up for air is something that we're hoping, maybe if you have a holiday or on the weekend, sort of taking an inventory of one, your coping mechanisms we talked about, but also of everything around you, how you're connecting with other people, your circle of influence, your stress responses. And this is a lot about like pausing, taking notice, and then finding a way through, and not from a place of distraction or numbing. I like the terms metabolizing what's happening to us, because, when you metabolize, there's two pieces. It's made up of sort of breaking down. So that's the processing piece. So this is what happened. I need to break it down. And then there's also the building up the nutritions and repair that we need. So this sort of looks at the two things of how we can take what we're experiencing and making meaning of it. How can we get what we need? So this is really about, stopping and processing. And sometimes, we want to be positive. We're going to talk a little bit about this later around toxic positivity and optimism. I'm an optimist, but there's times when I will sit in the suck. This has been an awful year. And there's times when we just need to feel the feelings and let it out. So we want to look at what's in our control. And, there's a lot of things that are in our control that we, when we get in this sort of feeling of overwhelm, one of the things that takes over is hopelessness. Now, the things we can always control collectively or individually, right? And looking at that, and collectively can mean, your school, your workplace, or your family unit, or any sort of bigger group where we're building a culture. We want to look at redefining what things can look like. Just because something is how we've always done it doesn't mean that it's necessarily how has to be done that way. And a lot of us right now, we're in a culture where our value can be defined by our productivity. So, being able to say I'm busy, or, I didn't have time for that. All of this is kind of like a badge of honor. We're in this sort of culture of busy and scarcity. And some of us are so sucked into that it's hard to even see how we could get out of it. We want to prioritize things, and language really matters. We want to break down the culture. Have left out, I have removed from my vocabulary, I didn't have time to. Instead, I use the term, I did not make time today. I prioritize something else. Also around, I get to instead of I have to. So these are just little things. And also we're sensitive to how other people perceive us. So even the most resilient people get overwhelmed, but we have to sort of let go a little bit of our attachment to our value being defined by our productivity.
So how can you do that? What are some other things you can do? This is hard for, I look at the list of the people that are here, and I know that many of you are very type A, you're helpers, you're in the helping profession. When's the last time you said no to something? Saying no to things that no longer serve you. Going back to that compassion fatigue piece, the zealot phase. It's okay to say no if you don't think something is going to serve you down the road. You only have so many resources to go around. You have to spread it between your work and your family and your partner and relationships. And it's okay to say no. I was telling Amy that I had a vice principal when I was a vice principal who used to say to me, Anne Marie, guilt is optional. You don't have to feel guilty because you say no to something. So lots of times, because people know you're going to say yes, they ask you, and it becomes a habit. Sure, I'll do that. Sure. And then you're trying to figure out how you're going to make that happen for yourself and for others. So consider saying no to those things that don't actually serve you at this particular time.
And I think just to add to that, there's this book called The Year of Yes, and talking about saying yes. And I think you sort of touched on that. As helpers, we don't need any more years of yes. And I see Billy's on here, and I think it was last year, we made a pact to have the year of no. And every time someone asked us something, we would say no if we really felt we couldn't do it. But that was really, really hard. So maybe 2021 can also be the year of no.
Or maybe.
Or maybe, yeah, maybe's good too.
I know this is really hard to do. And I know taking a mental health day or a wellness day is really challenging. And I know as a leader, your whole day, you're like, oh my gosh, what's happening back at my school? Are the police there? Do I have to do this? Is every kid okay? Is every teacher okay? Did all the jobs get filled? I know it's stressful. And as a teacher, just the thought of creating the plans for the day and making sure, that your kids are looked after, it's a challenge. But it is important because you are modeling for staff. There are staff that you work with that need a break. They need a wellness day. They need a mental health day. And by modeling that and taking that day and being really intentional about how you use it, you're showing others that you value that you value your mental health and you value their mental health. And so just taking a day for yourself and being really intentional about how you use that day. Maybe you spend your whole day wrapping Christmas presents. Maybe you spend your whole day baking. Maybe you sleep. Maybe you watch Netflix, and going back to that, tuning in to make sure it's not a day that you're spending numbing, but you're really intentional about the things that you do for yourself in order to fill your cup again, to help you to survive either that next 2 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever it is that you need. And I think we can help others when we see people struggling as well, to say, you know what, why don't you take tomorrow? It looks like you could really use a break, and work to support our colleagues and our staff in taking those days that they need in order to be well. Another idea is to take a social media detox. I know for me, around the election time here in the US. Like I was a hot mess. I was, constantly checking, reading, watching what's happening. What about this vote count? And it really was causing a lot of anxiety. Even my husband and my children both commented on it like, what is going on with you? And I think that constant barrage of social media, everything is COVID this, COVID that, the vaccine rollout, all of those things is a lot. And it does cause a lot of anxiety in people. If you're going to do a social media detox, put it on your social media. Say you're taking a break from it for a while. So there's not the expectation from people that you answer them. You can delete apps, block websites, unsubscribe to things, turn off your notifications, setting do not disturb hours on your phone. Like mine starts at 10 p.m. and goes till 8 a.m. now. And then just start looking at some new habits. I know, one of the challenges is FOMO. We're always afraid, oh, we're going to miss the latest celebrity announcement or whatever it happens to be if we're not on Twitter. But what could you make time for if you weren't on social media? You know, could you be outside more? Could you listen to a podcast or an audio book? Could you write a blog or a letter or a card that you haven't had a chance for? Could you look at potentially doing some acts of service within your community? What are some activities that you could substitute for that time you spend on social media?
So these are just, I just want to sort of highlight one thing that um, Emery was saying, around modeling, because one of the reasons that Emery and I work together is because as a leader, she is really a great model, especially during the COVID time. She was really intentional and, um, very much put the mental health of her staff forward. And that I work with a lot of schools, and that sets a culture where people feel the ability to access help, which is often a huge barrier in our sort of culture of busy and scarcity. So when we get in, this is sort of the reviving. So we want to sort of get some habits of breaking anxiety. And breaking sort of that stress or that overwhelming, the amygdala hijack. So one of the things is just, when we start to feel that, for me, it's like a sweat, it's like in the stomach, and, just stopping and saying it out loud is sort of what you're supposed to do, but that might look strange. So you can say it out, in your head, but, go for it as well. How do I feel? And an important piece of this is I feel angry, not I am angry. And this is language that's really can really change the way your body responds, because I am is a state. It's something about you, right? So it feels, even though it's just a little trick of words, it feels different to your brain than I feel, because I feel is movable, not that I am is not movable, but in that moment, it's important to sort of remove that from your vocabulary in these moments. So I feel angry that my husband leaves his dirty clothes on the floor. Shout out to tech support, throwing him under the bus here, because it makes me feel like he doesn't value my hard work of keeping all the clothes clean. Okay, that's a very, silly example, but we can get in this sort of response over, little minute things when we're in a state of overwhelm. There's also a grounding technique, 5-4-3-2-1. I won't explain that right now, but we will send you these things, and it's a really good one of just in the moment grounding yourself. And these really, basically what they do is give the brain sort of a stop so that you can go back to your rational thinking. It might not work. You might have to do it a few times, but it at least gives it sort of like a startle.
I also just wanted to say that for those of you that are in classrooms with students or even with staff, these are really great strategies that you can model for them as well, right? Helping kids to be able to tune into their feelings by modeling that for them. Like we used to do like community circle in the morning and morning meetings in the morning. These these are great activities that you can do with your students in order to help them to tune into some of those things that they're feeling as well.
For sure.
So we want to talk a little bit about what will 2021 look like for you, knowing that we still don't have any certainty at this particular point. We have no idea about what's going to come next. So we talk a lot about, I don't really like the term work-life balance because I don't think it's possible to have 50-50 all the time. And to me, that's what balance is. So I like to use the term work-life integration. And I think it's really important when we talk about work-life integration to be really aware that what works for me might not work for someone else. So, for example, I could stay at work when Jenny and I were working together. I could stay at work till 7 or 8 o'clock at night because I didn't have anyone that I had to go home to and look after. Jenny liked to leave at 4:30 because she wanted to have dinner with her family. She wanted to read to her kids. She wanted to put them to bed. That was a work-life balance piece. That's what she needed, and that's what I needed. So we have different circumstances and we have different levels of resilience. Some days are, you're feeling like a rock star, like a superhero, and you can handle anything that particular day. There's other days you can sometimes barely make it through the day. And so this idea of work-life balance or work-life integration is constantly changing, and it's really based on individual needs. My suggestion, going back to what Amy was saying earlier, is when you feel like you're not going in the right direction, is to take a step back and to tune into some of those feelings. So for me, I start to really breathe very shallow breathing. It's like I'm always trying to catch my breath, like I've been running on the treadmill, and I have to stop and step back from that and get a sense that I'm not very balanced at that particular time. Or having a critical friend, someone who could say, whoa, you need to take a step back. I noticed that this is happening. Sometimes that's really hard when it's your partner because you don't really want to hear from your partner that you're not doing something so well. So if you can have a critical friend or a colleague, that sometimes is a good place to start with that. And to just recenter yourself and try to get back to some of those values that you have. So if family is a value, for example, and you're not feeling that you have a good work-life integration that way around your family, is maybe stepping back and recentering to that value and spending some time with your family, or finding new ways that you can recenter there. Do you have anything to add to that, Amy?
So one of the things there is, and Emery said it before, around, we don't have an unlimited amount of resources, right? And your best resource is yourself. And in order to be the most useful of that is really boundaries. And this is something that, I will be honest, has been quite difficult for me. And I think, one of the things is we have those days, where we feel like, we can do anything, we're invincible, we're getting everything done, and then we might crash the next day. And understanding that those days where we crash are just as important to our productivity and our value as those days where we feel like a rock star. Now, with boundaries, we're not just talking about, like as a therapist, I can't add clients to social media, or, those sort of boundaries are really, really important. But the ones I want us to really think about today is the boundaries around our time and setting stricter parameters around how you allocate your time and yourself as a resource. So first, I know for me, I had to sort of get out of that idea of busy equals important and valuable. Really starting to break that down and acknowledge that, when I don't have those boundaries, I'm not the best version of myself. And helping be clear where I begin and where I end. As a leader, I'll give an example. I had a client message me or email. I am a night owl, so I work a lot at night. And sometimes I'll have clients or schools message me when it's my late at night, and my automatic response will be to email them back. Now, I'm setting this idea that I now have this expectation that they need to be able to answer at any time, or that I will answer within a certain amount of time. So in order to stop the contagion of sort of maintaining this culture of busy and this expectation of always being available, or I have learned, actually, Anne Marie taught me this one, is it's okay to respond, but then put it in my draft box and send it at a more, reasonable time, so that I'm not, because what we end up doing when we don't have clear boundaries is that we're setting expectations, especially when we're in the helping profession. We may think that we're helping, but actually we might be, doing too much of the work for someone, or we might be setting up unrealistic expectations. And a lot of us as leaders, there's a black hole of need. So if we keep trying to fill the need, we're, think of spooning that smoke, or shoveling that smoke. It's always going to be more. There's always going to be more. And the better a job we do, oftentimes the more work we have, right? So we really need to have these clear boundaries, because if we think of like lack of clear boundaries puts us at emotional and psychological danger. So this is a trick that I started using. I learned it, I'm not sure where, but this sort of idea, a lot of people, myself included, love lists, right? And so I would, start my day or the night before. I like to do it the night before, write the list of all the things I have to do the next day. Have to is my, try not to use that language, that I get to do the next day. But often I would look at the list and that would trigger this overwhelm response. So I started looking at sort of everything as a must, should, could, right? So they're in different orders, but it's must, should, could. And, putting the M, the S, the C, this is what I have to do today. This is really, and when we really break it down like this, the stuff we must do is really not as big or as overwhelming as we think. And some days, if we just get to the must, that's okay. And so this is like a framework that's been really helpful for me in prioritizing my time.
Sometimes we would use the urgent, and important, but not urgent sort of quadrants. Same sort of thing is, what's most urgent? And a lot of times those are those health and safety things that you absolutely have to do, or a time sensitive thing, or a deadline. Those are your musts. But the other things like, well, I could call my friend today, or I could, do, I don't know, start on a paper or whatever. You can leave those till another day. And even myself working on my doctorate, I was telling Amy today, I make a schedule like Monday, and I make it flexible enough where it's sort of like, these are my musts, and then there's some coulds or shoulds. And if I don't get to those, I move them to the next day, or I open it up so there's enough flexibility that I can do that over the course of the week. Depending on what it is that I have to do and what deadlines are most urgent.
And sort of building on that a little bit, sometimes if we're still feeling overwhelmed, it's really good to check with someone else, your closest colleague at work, or your partner, or a friend. This is what I'm seeing as must. And they might be able to say, okay, really must is drink water, get some sleep, so they might be able to reframe. And that's a lot about what setting intention is. And remember that often when we're going into this must, should, could, we're coming from a framework of scarcity and culture of busy. So we all have to sort of deconstruct that framework while we look at what we really need to get done. Now, setting intentions is quite hard, because sometimes I can pick up my phone and be like, I'm going to intentionally look at my social media. And then I'm like, so it's more than just, having that verbal confirmation. It's coming from a place of self-respect and remembering that we can choose differently. So oftentimes, our inability to be with ourselves has really increased, this need for distraction. And this is, we can see this all over, and especially in the time of COVID and instability. So, we often we can distract ourselves. So when we feel distracted, we want to be more intentional. okay, I'm watching TV, but I'm also, texting my friend, or, like I'm trying to do too many things. I want to bring myself back to, okay, I've decided to watch this because it's going to make me feel good. If I'm feeling disconnected, I want to pull myself back to the present. What do I have with me? What do I have near me? Sometimes that's just going to be myself or a picture, or, I have a bracelet that I wear and I'll rub that, or my wedding ring, something that brings us back to a connection. When we feel attached to an idea or a thing, and it starts to become a crutch, this can be substance, this can be just like a way of working or a habit. We want to come at it from a place of vulnerability, not vulnerability, curiosity. We want to look and say, why am I doing this? This is really what intentionality is about. We're asking ourselves, why am I doing this? And how am I doing this? And keep doing this every day. And when we're depleted, we want to fill our cup back up in it, whatever way that is. And for me, the year that I had an actual burnout where I needed to take time off, I ended up looking at how much was I reading? And I have an app that I track because I'm coming from this goal-oriented culture. And, I had only read 10 books that year. And for me, that's something that really, like, for lack of a better term, fills my cup. So knowing what your pieces are and getting to them. Self-compassion is something that I've come to the hard way. It's very hard for helpers often to feel compassion for ourselves. And I'm kind of using this term as a overarching, term for self-compassion strategies. Self-compassion is really ability to be kind to ourselves. And when I started sort of studying this and teaching about it, I started looking at the way I was talking to myself. And I realized that I would never talk to anybody else the way that I talk to myself. So really being mindful of that. And also looking at expectations. I recently heard this quote, and I don't know who said it, but they say expectations are a premeditated disappointment. And I thought that's quite interesting. And really, one of my best friends and I, we do this thing where we say, like, is that a realistic expectation or an unrealistic expectation? And really checking ourselves with that, around being mindful of our unique warning signs we talked about already. And also, you can go to the next slide, please. Increasing our social connections. And that doesn't mean necessarily just messaging someone. Maybe if you're spending all day on Zoom, maybe you want to have an old-fashioned phone call, or giving praise and support to someone. Around 10 years ago, I decided that I would start saying positive things whenever I noticed them. If I noticed that someone's hair looked good, or they, and that sort of kind of changed my whole framework of putting positivity out there. Now, one of the things we're seeing now is this sort of toxic positivity. And this is kind of the opposite in sitting in the suck. We need to balance being able to see reality and being positive. Being an optimist does not mean that we always think things are going to work out. It's just that we come to life with a framework that, people are trying the best that they can, or so we want to make sure that we're still giving people space to have their emotions and to feel heard while still maintaining this positivity. And so recognizing the difference between venting and complaining, and how we can reinforce the negativity, and being mindful of that. One of the things we really want to do when we want to complain or vent is, especially right now when everyone's stressed out, is we want to ask the other person, do you have a moment? I really need to vent. And giving them that space, and if you don't, then you say no, like, let me get back to you. But oftentimes we kind of just emotionally vomit all over other people. And when we're already feeling overwhelmed, we can't give the support that they need, and we also aren't going to feel very good about that. So those are some little strategies.
I just wanted to add on to what you were saying there about the emotional vomiting, because I say that all the time. I used to say that as a leader all the time. As I think one of the challenges is, as well as a leader, people emotionally vomit on you all the time. So, they come in, they sort of dump their emotions all over your desk or all over you, and you're left processing their emotions as well as your own. about that situation, and then your emotions on top of that. So I think it's very, you do have to tune into your own emotions, and also, how do you put that shield up, right? How are you wearing your face shield for other people's emotions? And how do you keep them from impacting you on a daily basis? So another strategy that you could use, one that's going to require you to take a little bit more time and really intentionally set some new habits, is a stop, start, continue. And I know that a lot of my colleagues know this strategy very well. Oftentimes, when we would go into a new school as a new leader, you ask staff what they would like them to stop doing in the context, what you'd like to start doing, and what they'd like to continue doing, and parents and students and so on. So you get a really good data set in order to be able to make some decisions as a leader moving into a new context. This, however, can be used for you personally. So, we're not talking about this as a short-term strategy, a more long-term strategy that maybe you want to really ruminate, stop, think, and then start really writing things down, about what are some things that, in 2021, you're going to stop doing. So maybe it's, I'm not going to work to 11 o'clock at night and then try to fall asleep and it's 1 a.m. because my brain can't turn off. Maybe I'm actually going to, when I set that do not disturb for 10 o'clock, I'm going to stop and I'm going to wind down. Maybe I'm going to turn off all the social media notifications on my phone. So I'm going to stop receiving social media notifications. One thing I started doing a long time ago is I started actually writing my workouts in my calendar. So, and we would publish and share our calendars with our staff. So it would say 5 to 6 on Wednesday, Pilates, Friday, 4 to 5 Pilates. And those were like non-negotiables for me. So I started doing that and being really transparent and intentional about that. And then, another thing that you might want to do is start deleting people from your contacts that really don't serve you well anymore, people that you don't hear from, people who only maybe text you when they want something. There's nothing wrong with deleting people that, don't serve you at a particular time. And then, and things that you could continue to do. I used to do a lot of meal prep as a mom on a Saturday or Sunday because our weeks were busy. So that would be something I would continue to do. And then, something else, maybe I'm going to ease into my Sunday. I'm going to get up, I'm going to have my coffee, I'm going to read the paper, I'm going to watch CBS Sunday morning. And then, I'm really not going to start my day till around 11. It's about what works for you. And what, just taking a real look at what are some things that you could stop doing and then start doing and continuing to do. Another strategy I've used over the last few years, and I know other colleagues have as well, is I use one word. This whole concept of New Year's resolutions doesn't really work for me. I'd be like, okay, I'm going to lose 10 pounds. And, 2 weeks into the new year, that's out the window and I'm already failed. So I like to reframe it. And I like to choose a word that sort of guides me throughout the year. And I really take a long time to ruminate and think and to set this intentionally and make it my mantra or my motto for the year. And, when I'm feeling out of balance, going back to that work-life integration and those values that ground me, I often would go back to this one word and to examine whether or not I was really staying true to what I'd set out as my intention. So last year, unknowingly, my 2020 word was acceptance. And I think that's really funny now because that was set at, pre-COVID. And I had decided that I was going to accept, the highs and lows that the year was going to bring. I think I've done a pretty good job of that. About being uncomfortable and being emotional and being challenged, about pushing my limitations. I'm pretty sure everyone's done that this year. And taking on more of the love and support of my family, which has been great because I've had that opportunity to be with my family this year. my VP Jenny, she's here right now. She used to say, Emery, sometimes done is better than perfect. So I started to accept that things didn't always need to be perfect. Learning from failure, accept failure and learn from the lessons. And then, just look at all these possible opportunities that I have and accept them, and assume positive intentions and accept people's positive intentions. So that was my sort of word for last year. And I go back and I reevaluate and I'm like, I think I did a pretty good job on that so far, end of December here. For 2021, I don't know, honestly, grace, hope, pride, promise, change, growth. I don't know what it's going to be. I really have to think on it. And I want to reevaluate sort of my year this year, and look at what it possibly could be moving forward.
So one of the things, going into 2021, I think one of the words we know cannot be is certainty, right? This cannot be our word for 2021. So I'm going to kind of sort of summarize or sort of add, hopefully put into a shell how we can sort of go forward with really a lack of certainty and not knowing really what the world's going to look like, what things are going to be, and one of the things is assumptions, right? Oftentimes, and even when assumptions are made with the best intent, they can, what we, more technical is like perceived needs and actual needs. So often, I'm going to assume what someone needs and I'm going to do it, but that's what my perception. And even when we don't know exactly what a person needs, if we can give them the space and honesty, they'll make that their own, right? So we want to model this by saying what we need. And that's really hard, and I'm very bad at that. But, yesterday, Emery and I have known each other for a while, but this is our first time kind of working on a project, just the two of us. And I was really honest about my needs and it was no big deal. But the story I had told myself was, she's not going to like me anymore, and this is often where we go. I like this, I'm borrowing from Brene Brown, and we're going to send out a list of sort of extra resources that we found helpful for ourselves with the email tomorrow or in the next few days. And that's going to have, some of her stuff, but it's this story we tell ourselves. And often we build this narrative around what people are thinking, what they need, what I need. And it's not always super accurate. And remembering that we have to be able to model saying our needs and also be able to hear people when they give their needs. One example is when I'm upset, I don't like to be touched. It's a thing. My husband has this feeling of he must hug me, and over the 15 years, we've been able to, sort of meet each other halfway. He can sit near me or, tap my shoulder, but, that's all through communication and needing. And one of the things that I think is really, really important and is this idea, and, when we had the boundaries, there was the gas mask, and we have on, they say, put your own gas mask on, or I'm not saying gas mask,
We're not
oxygen mask. We're not using gas mask. See, 2020, woo! Your oxygen mask, put your own on first. Don't put someone else's on. And that's really hard for people in a helping profession, right? But you cannot pour from an empty cup. I know we all know this, but two sort of metaphors that kind of put this into place with me that I heard recently is this idea of don't get in someone else's canoe, right? If someone's canoe, I feel this might be the most Canadian reference, but someone else's canoe is going under, right? It's filling up with water. If I'm getting in, I'm not helping anyone. I'm just going to drown with them, right? I need to be on the riverbed and throw out a life preserver, but I need to make sure that I'm secure from where I am. And oftentimes what we're doing when we're getting in this overwhelm, here's another metaphor, is we're running a marathon without stopping for to drink water, or we think things are a sprint when it's really a marathon. So really remembering that as we we are our best resource and we need to take care of ourselves. You can do anything, and we build, hopefully, we have this, we teach our children this, we tell our staff this, but we can't do everything. And I have this reminder on my screen every time I open my laptop that just because I can't do everything, I will not do the things that are within my control. So finding structure, you know, Anne-Marie's better at this than me, but right now with all the uncertainty, a lot of us need something we're tethered to. You know, I volunteer a couple times a week, and that's my structure or something that I can get tethered to, you know, and people are, that's something I prioritize my time with because it makes me feel good. Laughing, you know, it's okay to sort of do the things, you know, like watching a comedy or with the intention of feeling good or having a drink or all these things within intentionality, and remembering that we cannot heal or get well the same way we got unwell. So remembering to break these habits that are no longer serving us. Stress responses work until they don't. That's the thing. And we no longer want to get to the place where they're not working anymore. So we want to build these bigger resiliency posts.
Awesome. So Amy and I will include our contact information and with our stuff. And if you want to reach out to us, we're happy to respond. And we are going to share with you, like we said, in the next couple of days, once we sort of get it together, the recording and the slides in a PDF, and then resources that you can use as well. I think, you know, we're not experts. I mean, we have some information and we have some experience, right? We're in the helping profession and leadership professions as well. You know, sometimes we've learned from experiences that haven't been so positive or from other people's experiences that haven't been so positive. And we say all of these things knowing that how hard it is. I think that's really important, is that we do know how hard it is. It's really hard to change habits and to look out for yourself when you're so used to looking out for other people. What we hope is that we have given you some perspective, some things to think about, and some practical strategies that you can use as you try to work through this current state that we're all in, at whatever place you're at. So whether you are surviving, whether you are, you know, getting ready for 2021 and you're good to go and you're on this new amazing path, whatever that happens to be, these strategies can be used, you know, for you in whatever way serves what you need. Amy, do
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, just a couple of things, you know, one, again, I want to reinforce that, like, please reach out to us, you know, like oftentimes I know people say that and then, but we really do mean it. We, you know, not just because, you know, we could help you in your school or, you know, personally, but, or, you know, like with services that we offer, but also just like letting us know how you're doing and how this sat with you, or if there's any questions that you don't feel comfortable putting in the chat box or, you know, whatever. I think one of the things that is really important in a time like this, and if 2020 has taught me anything, it's around like we have to all be in this together. You know, we're not all in the same boat. I think one of the slides said, and I think that's also been very highlighted in this year. But we're all in the same storm and learning from each other. You know, one of the reasons we wanted to put this on today is because we've been in that place where we felt overwhelmed and burnt out, and you know, just making sure we're helping each other. So that's really important to us. And also like thanking, you know, the things today were, there's a lot of different, we're trying to go as fast as we could, mindful of people's times, you know, and there's a lot of different strategies and some will feel good for you and some won't. So just toss out what doesn't feel good and toss out, you know, keep what does, or, you know, if you remember anything, it's more, you know, taking care of yourself and that you are your best resource and that you're not defined by your productivity or the value in that day. You know, we all have these ups and downs, and you know, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So I really want to thank you for sharing your time with us. And there haven't been any questions, which, you know, I don't know, that could be a good thing, that could be a bad thing. I don't know if we can unmute people. I don't, you know, again, that's why we have tech support / my husband.
Flash Dave.
People can unmute themselves if they have a question they want to ask. If you want to leave, you can leave, but if you want to stay, I know Anne-Marie and I will stay for another 10 minutes or so just to see if anyone has questions, and we'll stop the recording to make sure that it's confidential or whatnot, or if anyone has anything to say.
Hey, I wanted to thank you guys. I just thought I'd come off mute. When I tried to chat, it only could go to one or the other of you.
Wow.
So I didn't chat.